So in this video, I'm going to expand on the last video and just show you a few tips and tricks, which I think is really cool when debugging in Rider. Now this one, I suspect not a lot of people know. I've only recently learned this one, but let's put a breakpoint here and then let's debug this. And then if we go to our HTTP request, so Control Tab, and if you remember this from the last video, so if I just make that HTTP request, so if I remove that and then continue execution, and again, we can do it from here. You don't need to move the mouse all the way down here if you're using the mouse, or you can press F5 to resume. So now we're here, and a very useful thing you can do with a link statement is if you hold down the Alt key, you can hover over each of these, and if you click, it's going to execute that and show you the result at that point. So for example, podcast, if we hover the mouse over podcasts, we can see this is the order. And if we look up here, we can see the genre we passed in is .NET. So we've got two .NET podcasts and something that isn't .NET. And this query is doing a where filtering by .NET. So hovering over this, we can see all three. If I alt click on where, which is applying this condition, and then go to results, we can see it's ran up to this where clause. The unhandled exception podcast is on the top, and that starts with U, so that's not alphabetically sorted, which is what the next one is, order by title. If I alt click on this one, and then results, we can see it is now alphabetically sorted. So being able to alt and click on a link query is, in my opinion, absolutely amazing. And as I say, I've only recently discovered this. So moving forward, this is going to be something I'll be using all the time. Whilst we're here, if we hover over podcasts and expand, so we can see all the information here, like title, genre, but you might not want this level of detail, and it might be an even more complicated object too. If you expand, you can pick one, say maybe the title. You can either click this flag icon here or right click and say pin to top. If you do that, then it's collapsed it. But if we look again, then we can see it's only showing this here. And if we expand, the title is actually at the top and it's pinned. So that's really useful if your object has a key identifier, which you just want to see that in the list in the debugger. Another more permanent way of doing that is if we actually go to, I'm going to control click here to go to this object, you can add an attribute called debugger display and alt enter to import the references. And you can see the AI, which we're going to talk about later, has very kindly done this for me. So I'm going to press tab. So what this does, this gives you a way of being a bit more explicit about how you want that to display in the debugger. And you can see it uses string interpolation. So I've got title and genre. So I'm going to restart the debugging. So I can click here, then go back to the HTTP and run this again and click here. Then this hasn't actually worked because I've got something pinned. So let's unpin that and try again. Then we can see it's using that format that we specified in that attribute. Another cool thing you can do is if you right click anywhere, you can say add inline watch. So that is just done a text box in your code. As we type, we get the IntelliSense. And let's just do whatever. Starts with kube. And then I can click on this, and then we've got to explicitly evaluate that and then do results. And we can see that entry. But that's just it in line. So that's there now for us to click on if we need it. So again, that's really useful. If you want to remove it, you can edit it and just get rid of that. Another really useful tip is if we stop this debugger, if you've got a bit of code you just want to repeatedly debug and test without running your whole application, is if you create a public, I need to do this within the class, a public static method, let's call it foo. Then by doing this, you can see we've got this triangle run icon, and you can do alt enter as usual, and you can choose to run or debug it. Or if you want to click, you can run or debug it. So let's just do like console.writeLine, hello dome train, and then F9 to put a breakpoint, and then we can click here and do debug, and that will create a new configuration, and then we hit this. So that's really useful for just little snippets of code you want to work with. And if we stop this, because we've created the configuration, if we do it again, we can just run it and it'll go straight to there, or you can press F5 to go straight to it. So Rider's full of just little quality of life improvements like that. Another example of these little things that can make your life easier. Say if you're doing authentication stuff and you're working with JWT tokens. If I just create a new JWT, now I'm just going to paste an arbitrary one rather than actually writing code. And then let's do F9 and then F5 to run this. If I view this in the debugger, so I go to view, then we can see it's actually intelligently decoded the JWT. So rather than having to go to like jwt.io or jwt.ms website to decode your JWT, you can just view it in the debugger. And the same applies if you were viewing JSON, it'd be like a JSON tab, so you can view it formatted and you've got the usual collapse and expand. I'm assuming the same for XML. I've not used XML in a very long time, but there's lots of little things to help you visualize your data. So if I stop this, a few other things we can do, if you've got a process that you're not running, you've not got the project for, but you want to debug it, say it's something running in IIS or something, then you can do this and do attach to process or Control Alt and P. So this is showing my processes. You could search and find your IIS process or whatever it is you want to remote debug. You can view it as a list or a tree. And you've also got the option of remote debugging. If you're doing remote debugging, say you want to investigate something on a different machine, you would have to install the remote debugging tool on the other machine so that your debugger can connect to it. And this link will take you to the documentation where you can download the tool and it'll talk you through it. Going through remote debugging is out of scope of this course though. So there's a few extra debugging tips, but so far we haven't really spoken about exceptions, which sadly in .NET we see a lot of. There are a few different things in Rider which are useful to know when dealing with exceptions, and we're going to talk about that in the next video. So just a quick one this time to talk about exceptions. So in this code, I've just added a entry which is null. As you can see, it has got a squiggly, which is warning because we don't have a non-nullable type here, but for this example, we're going to ignore that. Or maybe without thinking about it, some developers put the bang operator to ignore it without really thinking it through. So let's assume we don't know this is here and we are running our application in the debugger. And if we go to our HTTP and I'm just going to run it, then our output just says 500. So it's a 500 server error from our API. If I scroll up a bit, it does show my exception here, but it would be much better if this would stop in the debugger. So what I can do is I can press Control Shift and E, which opens up this dialog which we've seen before. You can get to this dialog with a Control Shift and B, but the difference when you do E is that it highlights this. And basically what you can do, you can enable it, and that means that any exception it will break on, the execution will break. So if I mark this as done now, and then run our HTTP request, then immediately it's landed when that exception was thrown. So that's now given me a clue as to that 500 error. I can see that we're inside this expression. I can hover over and I can see that X is null, which is one of the items in podcast. Unfortunately, because I've currently broken it inside the Lambda, I can't view this podcasts collection. So what I'll do is I'll click here, pop another breakpoint in. So I can click or press F9, and then I'm going to restart. Okay, so back to HTTP, run it again. I've hit my breakpoint. I can inspect podcasts, pull down the list, and I can see it's null. So that's told me what the issue is. Now what I can do is I can actually drag this up to here. And I want to step into here because there might be more complicated logic in here. We know that in here it's just a hard-coded array, but imagine we don't know that. So if you remember, F11 will step into, and that's gone into it. F10 to step through, and actually there I can see that that's null. So that's very quickly helped us discover what the issue is. Pressing F5 has taken me back to here, and F5 again, it's hit the exception. So another thing you can do when you get this exception window is you can press this Stack Trace Explorer, which actually pops it down here. And you've got nice hyperlinks for different parts of the call stack. So I can click through. This Stack Trace Explorer is actually really useful if you've got this kind of text in some log somewhere and you've copied it in. So I'm just going to copy it here. Let's pretend I didn't get it from here. And I've just copied this from some logs. If I then stop debugging, so imagine I've just copied that stack trace from some logs file somewhere else, and I do Control ET, then that's popped up this Stack Trace Explorer again. And in the same way, I can click on these hyperlinks. If I press Control Shift B again to get this dialog up again, sometimes having this enabled all the time can get a bit annoying, but sometimes you do want it on. One example might be the task cancelled exception. So if I just say throw new task cancelled exception here, and then I'm going to debug again, then HTTP and run this again. So we've hit this task cancelled. And this might be something you just want to ignore, but you want to break on any other exceptions. Then when you hit this, you can choose this button here, mute and resume. So that's going to mute this type of exception and then continue. Going back to our Control Shift and B, we can see that this is now listed in this list, and we can see that it's added it and unchecked this suspend execution. So if I want to stop ignoring this now, I can just click on this and then press the delete key. So there's a few tips and tricks for dealing with exceptions. In the next video, we're going to look at disassembling and debugging into third-party code.